Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Blue Grit Radio. This is your host, Eric, and today I'm joined by the Autumn Clifford. That is the Autumn Clifford. You can check the IG handle. Uh, she lists as a former LEO, but we're going to talk about that. She's still involved in law enforcement. She's a professional coach and all about self-protection, a lot of that focus towards women. And we're going to talk about what got her in the career, what she's doing now. She's wearing lots of hats, and so we're just going to dive into it. Autumn, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Eric. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's good to chat with you just briefly beforehand. It's so cool, this whole project, getting to meet all these people from around the country, around the world. Actually getting linked in through another up and coming guest, Bridget, that you've connected with, that I've only been messaging with about all these competing schedules and time. So it was really awesome to be able to sync up with you and get this time to connect together.
Yeah, and I appreciate you reaching out, and I appreciate Bridget. She's dynamite. I can't wait for you to bring her on. Your listeners are going to love her. She's been on my podcast so many times. We have some projects together, and I think you'll really like her.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm excited. Well, Autumn, so what brought you into law enforcement?
Yeah, so I got into law enforcement when I was 20 years old. I'm going to backtrack, and we're going to go back to go forward. So
Yeah.
um, I've been in martial arts since I've been 5 years old. I'm a second degree black belt. Um, when I graduated college a half a semester early. But prior to that, which had led me into law enforcement, prior to that, I was waitressing, and then I decided I was going to go do hair.
Mm,
And when you are built like me, so I'm not a little girl, and I'm 5'6.5", and so my mom always said I was built like a brick shit house, right? And I've grown up fighting. I mean, I've been in the martial arts, like I told you, I studied
mm-hmm.
mixed martial art my whole life. So I grew up fighting. So going and doing anything in like a cubicle or behind a desk wasn't for me. I very quickly, within 3 months of doing hair, I was actually doing clients, and I was like, hell to the no, this is
Mm,
not me. And then so I did the only other thing I could think of, and that was to go and major in criminal justice and become a police officer,
yeah.
you know? And the thing is, Eric, and I hear this a lot with all law enforcement officers, we all get in because we want to make a difference, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. So I'm curious, do you feel like, I mean, was that law enforcement itch always there and maybe you were trying to just force a different venue and a different vocation with the hair and with the different things you tried first?
I mean, probably a little bit. My sensei, so my karate instructor, he was very inspirational to me. Somebody who I
Mm-hmm.
really looked up to. He was a police officer, and then my uncle, who I spent a lot of time with. We go horseback riding, and I was pretty close with. He was actually a chief for like,
Okay.
so. So I would say yes and no. Like I'll give you this. Like on the contrary, like my husband knew he wanted to be a state trooper since he was 5 years old, and
Right.
he's so crystal clear on it, and that was not me. But
Yeah.
I think I just think, like I said, the martial arts and like kind of who I am naturally, it was a really good fit for the time.
Yeah, it sounds like it's one of those things where you look back and you're like, no, duh, right? You could chart it out, and maybe those around you are like, well, it makes perfect sense. And I was similar, right? I've shared my story several times where I was not like your husband. I was more like you, where I tried other things. But if you look through my life, childhood, and adolescence, there's these little clues of things that would have indicated that this was very much a path that I could get really passionate about or could excel at.
Yeah, exactly. How did you tell me? I want to hear a little bit about you, if you don't mind, Eric. How did
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm a As, so being Chinese American, raised by immigrant parents, like law enforcement is not the thing. A lot of things are not the thing. It's a pretty narrow path, especially when my parents were educated and then they did the whole grind where they had very little when they came over here from Taiwan, and it was a lot about the typical immigrant model, which is you grind your butt off so that you can provide uh, a better life, a better scope of opportunities for your children, and their duty is to continue to do the same. It's all elevating as far as uh, access, education, resources, income, all these things. And a lot of those things are equated to success rather than, pursuing your passion and things like this that are, a lot more Western.
Yes.
Um, so, just I guess a crash course is, I tried a lot of those routes, whether it was, early in school, high school, doing, college courses in high school or college level, trying to dip my toe in computer science and dip my toe in advanced math. And none of it was really jiving with me. I started college as a pre-med, and quickly within a quarter, I was like, absolutely not. And then
No
was just trying
kidding.
to figure out, yeah, what I could move toward to maybe keep, graduate studies, like going back to business school in the, in the forecast, but, get an undergrad, I suppose, with while graduating on time. And
Yeah.
so that led me to political science. There's definitely, it wasn't like I have this huge interest in politics. I actually get really frustrated by politics for the majority of my life. As a young adult, the vast majority of elections, I didn't vote for anything just because I was so cynical to all of it, especially after learning so much about it. But I did love to learn about governmental systems, Middle Eastern studies, interactions with that. And I think that what that really showed was just I just love learning about culture.
Mm,
Um, but I suppose to look back through my adolescence, there was just always this frustration for people taking advantage of others. I was, a pretty small kid, pretty shy, and so whether it's like the literal or proverbial little guy, I wasn't bullied or anything per se, but I remember always seeing that and having that really frustrate me. And I think that becoming an adult and becoming a man, I recognize that there's a lot of things that I could do that weren't necessarily in the expectations or desires of others, but I could take ownership, and I could build my body, I could build my mind, I could get stronger, faster, all these things. And it really made me want to pursue this, this very overt archetype to be that person that others, could fall to, and you could protect others. So I, you know, coming up on my graduation with college, I was full bore testing for police and fire that spring. And fire was extremely competitive, way more so than now. It's funny because I talked to fire friends, and they're like, why can we not fill these spots now? And it's just a crazy service industry thing.
mhm,
Um, but all these doors opened up in policing once I figured out the testing process, interview process back in 2007. Before the recession. So it was really the perfect time to get in,
mm.
and I've been at it since. So it's been 16 years for me.
That's amazing.
And thank you.
That's like a really good story too, because that's definitely not as cool as my story. I mean, no, my story is
Your
definitely
story's
not as
cool.
cool. No, I don't
I
think
wanted to I wanted to be more like you as a kid. Like Chinese American kid, I'm looking up to Bruce Lee. I love Ninja Turtles. I really wanted to get in martial arts. I think there was a time when I was really young, if I remember right, like I was taken to like a dojo, but I was so shy, right? So I didn't really want to do it. But then through the rest of my, adolescence, I was like, man, that'd be so cool. But then just never really getting over the hump or really pushing it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I grew up a lot on, The Karate Kid.
Yeah, yeah,
I love that. I love
that's
that.
perfect. So tell me a little bit about your career in law enforcement, where that took you, what your takeaways were, and what that was like for you.
Yeah, so compared to you, I was on the road for about 1 minute. Um, like I said, I've been in law enforcement since I've been 20 years old. At 26 and a half, I
Mm-hmm.
suffered a career-ending injury. I have a back injury. I have a herniated, torn, and degenerative disc all in my lowest back. Causes
Uh,
my legs to go numb, and severe, severe pain. And so that came kind of suddenly. I had been dealing with pain and it was getting even worse and worse and worse. But, um, you know, I joke a lot with a lot of female officers and I say, but I wasn't going to be that chick. So I never said anything.
mm,
And I went to my doctors on my own and went to the chiropractors on my own. And then suddenly, one day I go to this chiropractor, he decides, after treating me for a little while and I was not getting any better, he decides to do an x-ray on my back. And that was the day that everything changed for me. He said, "You are absolutely done working right now. Like, it is not safe for you. Calling your chief." No, he said, "I'm going to write you a note," writes me a note. Did I give it to my chief? hell no, I didn't give it to my chief. Like, yeah, whatever. I'm gonna keep working. And then anyways, so I go in a couple days later for my appointment. He realizes that I have not given that note to my chief. So then he calls my chief, and I got pulled. I got put on desk duty, and then from there I had to go see my PCP, and then from there I was done. And that was really shocking for me. I was halfway through my master's at the time, and I was working on getting. I was working with the detective sergeant. I was doing a lot. I was the first member of my agency, but honestly, one of the first members in my entire state to be on our federal human
Mm,
trafficking task force. And this is back when it was kind of like a new thing, Eric.
yeah.
And so I was really working my way into being administration. And so that was quite devastating for me when, I married um, my police academy sweetheart,
Mm,
and all of our friends are police officers. And I just planned on putting in my 25 years. And overnight, I got told that you can't do that anymore.
yeah. So when was that injury? How long had you been in it?
Just 6.5 years.
So it's a chunk, right?
Yeah.
Um,
hmm
what insight do you have, and do you have any regrets, or specifically with that transition? Right, it's something that I talk about on my podcast a lot with people that have exited out of police, whether it's 5 years or 20 years. It's a huge part of our identities.
Yes.
Are there any of those things that buzz around your head that you would impart towards those that are coming in, or even those that are around for the last 10, 12 years?
Yeah, so this is something that I talk about with everybody. So, what led me to be with you today would be I started my podcast back in 20, I believe 18, and that was so if I go back, it was late 2016, 2017 in there, when I was injured and I was no longer on the road. And I suffered a severe identity crisis, which
Mm,
is very common for us law enforcement officers, because this job really becomes our full identity. And it is actually more than just a job for us.
yeah.
And whether that's good or bad, I don't know, still up for debate, right? And so I started this podcast because I was pissed off. My first 10, 20 episodes, you hear a very angry officer who is hurt, and
Mm-hmm.
who is hurt by her agency, my police chief, um, because there was a workers' comp um, suit filed. And because of that, he told the entire agency to not talk to me. So I was
Wow.
my partner and one of my best friends was the head of the union, and he uninvited me from his wedding. He never spoke to me again. And it was absolutely devastating for me. I mean, this is my partner who I work 3 out of my 4 days every single week with. We we were really big into interdiction on days off. I hung out with him and his wife. And I mean, Eric, like, I was, other than his grandmother, I was the first person he showed the diamond to that he was going to propose to his
Mm,
wife. Like, we were tight. I'm not just making it up,
yeah.
And so that was really, really hard. My so my podcast was a way of an outlet for me. Prior to that, I was couch ridden. And for 6 months I couldn't do shit because I was in so much pain, and at 5 days a week I was going through therapy and all of these things. I fell into a depression. I got diagnosed with PTSD and an anxiety disorder. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason I'm telling you this is because anybody listening a lot of cops can relate to this. I have found over the years from telling this story. And if I could, if I could tell anybody this is, if there's anybody who is not a cop yet and you are going through and you think you want to be a police officer, do not get a degree in criminal justice. That that you can just please take my advice on that. And at least have like another, like, you can have two majors, or you can minor in something else. I think that's really important. Especially, I mean, you did that probably not on purpose. You said you know. but you did that. That way it gives you more options because the thing is Eric, people aren't prepared for the day that they can't do this job anymore.
Mhm.
And it happens. And it happens more often than not. And we aren't prepared for that. So really it's for me it's making sure you do not lose your identity fully to this job. And so from the podcast, I started a coaching business. Um, well, prior to the podcast, I started coaching. I took my training, education, and experience, which I highly suggest anybody does. Cops
Yeah.
oftentimes tell themselves that they are just a cop. But the thing is you are so much more than just a cop. And I'm like using my fingers in quotations.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have so much, you do so much as a police officer that you are literally discounting, and
Mhm.
you just have to put together a really good, a really good resume, and you can do literally anything. And I think if there's any, especially any veteran officers listening to this, a lot of them are going to be like, yeah, well, I'm already vested in all these things. And yes, it's true, but your happiness matters. It really, really matters because you just never know when our time is up.
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces there if I can rewind a little bit, and even going way back to where you said you didn't want to be that chick, right? Like no one wants to be that chick, no one wants to be that guy because we hear it, right? We can be our own worst enemies individually or as a culture where some people, whether it's an actual physical injury or an actual mental injury, they start typecasting, right? They start saying, "Well, I'm going to grind it out," right? But in
Mhm.
hindsight, you recognize that if you would have grinded it out, knocked out and checked on to find out the extent of it, right? Degenerative disc, man, that could be catastrophic, right? It was already catastrophic.
Mhm.
Um, but there's I think of a lot of examples, even some new recruits that are just like, thankfully, they are actually reporting their injuries. They don't want to extend their progress, but at the same time, like this is your life, right? It's not just your career, but this could be your life if you're playing with fire. You got to get checked, and that's physical, that's mental, and there's such a balance, right, to being aware of these different circumstances, but then also recognizing that you can't just fix everything by grinding through.
And that's the thing. That's like it's the old school mentality, and I think back then, that was one thing. But for me, the tear in my disc was almost all the way through. And
Wow.
so if that would have teared, it's the lowest disc in my back. I could be paralyzed.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, I'm not going to risk that.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you share that story. And then, as far as identity, that's huge, right? We recognize how much it's prevailing, right? It's not just what you spend 40, 50, 60 hours a week sometimes doing, but it's what you think about in your time off because
Yes.
you really have to be successful at it, especially at the beginning, right? You're changing how you look at things. You're recognizing threats, you're recognizing exits, and all these things that a normal person
Right.
doesn't and shouldn't have to think about. Um, but to be successful, you really got to go full bore. And then to remove that, right? Your circles are all that. And then so to be disconnected, that's hard. And I know that more curriculums are actually talking about living outside the blue world and having friends outside of law enforcement. But even then, like, it's hard. I feel really fortunate to have some of the friend circles I do. But it is an effort. Like, you have to be intentional about it.
Absolutely. Yep. 100%.
Yeah. So tell me about how the podcast has gone. Since you started as a vent, as a frustration, right? Like an outlet back. We're looking at 5 years ago, and how's it been in that progression?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty funny because I literally started the podcast as a vent, and so like after the first 10 episodes, I was like, all right, I'm good. I when they're very raw and it's very explicit, so don't listen like with children around, and then all of the sudden I stopped, and my email got flooded with cops from around the world.
Mm,
Around the world. That like blew my mind. And they were like, holy shit. Like nobody's ever voiced their opinion. And again, like this is before this stuff was big. Like this was way before, like very few. I mean, there were some police podcasts, but not a lot. And there wasn't a whole lot on social media or anything at that time. It was, and so having a woman who, yeah, had the balls because I wasn't in the, I wasn't in the job anymore. So I had the balls to say what everybody else couldn't say because
Hmm.
I wasn't on the job. And so I tried to stop and then they wouldn't let me. People, just cops were like, "Can you please keep going?" Like, and I had police wives reaching out to me being like, "Wow, my husband actually really relates to you. Can like you talk to me? Can you help me? Like I want to help. Like I want to be really good for him." And so it just kind of evolved and it's actually really it helped me become a better speaker. So I speak and I travel around the country and I train police officers and I speak at different events and I'm a keynote speaker. And so um, my podcast honestly really helped me become a better speaker. It has helped me serve people worldwide. And like I said, or like you said, I'm a professional coach. I've been, and I'm going to be honest with you, the term coach is now like way overplayed. And everybody can call themselves a coach. And I totally understand that. But, I've been doing it for 8 years. I have more than replaced my full-time income with it. And um, you know, and from what my clients have said, I'm changing lives based
Yeah.
off of my experiences and helping them. And the podcast, Eric, is, that's how I connect with people.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, yeah, coach, like anyone can say they're a coach. I mean, I love that word, but I love identifying with that verb and with that role because it's so necessary, right? Like the world is so dizzying and we need mentors, we need teachers, we need coaches. So we just need people to show up for each other. And I love that pure aspect is what I hear when you're describing what's going on, right? You have the liberty to say what a lot of law enforcement officers are thinking, but they don't feel empowered to do so. And I know that that's a phrase on your social, right? Empowering women, right? And so that there's a dynamic there that I'd like to get your thoughts on. As far as when you approach the female population in our industry, pre-recording, we're discussing your haters, um, which you have them. I have them, and I think that when you stand up for something, you're going to have them, and that's the cost of doing business. But it
Yeah.
means that you're taking a stand on something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so let me back up. So I have been coaching, right? So we talked about that and I've coached men and women. I led a group full of men, first responders, for a couple of years and it was really great. And then honestly, I got to a point a couple of years ago and I said, I don't see one female officer mentoring any other women, female officers, or women who want to be on the job. I didn't see it.
Mm,
I saw a lot of very beautiful women police officers. They look like models and they're beautiful. And I'm not taking anything away from that. And they have massive platforms. But I didn't see them actively helping and mentoring these women. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna do that. I'm not full time anymore. I'm part time. But I could help a woman who wants to get on the job and I could help a veteran officer with her mindset. Like that's what I knew that I could do. And so I just started creating I just started creating posts and some of it was very controversial and some of it I can look back and be like, "Oh, that was just like the trauma, wounded Autumn that was just kind of, picking a fight. That was not necessary. I didn't need to say
mm,
that." But whatever. I mean, I said it and I keep it all there because I want people to see the transformation I've gone through as a coach and as a person.
sure.
But that really pissed a lot of people off. Advocating and standing up and being the face for women in law enforcement. I mean, it even pissed a lot of women off too. Like they were, um, and that's what I'm okay with that. I'm okay because at the end of the day, I enjoy helping and being the woman who I needed when I was in law enforcement. I had one woman at one police department that I worked with. She took me under her wing and she really showed me the ropes. And then when I got done and I moved down south, 2 hours south to a different police department, I didn't really have that. And it was very empty for me.
Mm,
And I mean, and we can sit here and I don't like to, I don't pull the girl card. I don't think women need to be treated any differently. In fact, if you actually go and pay attention to any of the content, I'm literally telling women, like, be squared away, go train MMA. Like, you need to be a fighter, and like your PT test, go and hit what the guys are doing. Don't just
mm,
settle for, if there's two different for male or females or whatever, like, don't just settle. Like, I say a lot of things that piss a lot of people off, but I mean, that I really believe in equality, but I also want to say this, Eric, it is different for a woman. It's a male dominated world. People look at us differently, especially in this role. And, we become moms. And quite honestly, the culture isn't ready for that. And they do not know how to treat a woman. And I mean, I could go on and on and on and tell you something that really surprised me. And this is from going around the country and teaching all women's classes, is a lot of these agencies don't have a friggin' maternity leave. And we have women coming back on the road after exhausting all of her sick time in like 4 to 6 weeks after giving birth. It's like, are you kidding me? Are you
yeah.
kidding me?
Yeah, I have a lot of opinions about that in that I just feel like we as a country, when you look at European nations and
I
how,
know.
excuse me, how much leave people have,
Mhm.
pardon me, but I mean, our children need to be our utmost investment. And that's why mentorship and discussing that is so important to me. You know, as police officers, we see, excuse me,
It's okay.
of course, it's when you have something in your throat and you're just going to try to grind through it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Conversation of grinding through it, whether rather than just taking a moment, having a sip of water, and now I'm good. Um, but yeah, I mean, a lot of our societal ills are because we're not investing the time with our kids, right? And so that's a classic example. Like, yes, there is a huge gap there in a lot of places, but let's just recognize, man, how much better off would we be if we actually made a commitment to foster that rather than adding this backwards pressure, to people getting back to work after having a kid. Um,
Yes.
but you hit on so many things as you kept going that I wanted to kind of ask you about. So that's fantastic. I mean, the first thing is that you're talking about having a direct mentor, right? You experienced at one point in your career another woman taking you, under the wing and paying attention to you, right? And at the same time, you also know what that felt like to not have that. But I also love that you're talking about, hey, like you're providing this insight and this advice and this feedback to women, saying, hey, I'm not trying to coddle you or treat you differently, but because of that, I'm trying to say, hey, like I'm asking you to take this additional challenge on. I'm asking you to push harder. And in a lot of ways it just becomes different. I'm glad you talked about that too, right? Because it's different for you as a woman to talk about that rather than to me as a man to say, hey, women, get your stuff together. Like, how does that come off, right? And I think we just need to recognize the different positions that we have. um I told the story before, but it was very different for a candidate who was applying, making his rounds, doing tours, and meeting different department reps. He came to my department and we met, and he's a young Hispanic man. And he said, "Wow, Sarge, that's so cool. You're an Asian dude and you're a Sarge." I was like, "What is it? Is it cool?" He's like, "I just don't see that a whole lot." And then I'm thinking about where he's from. I'm thinking about where he lives now, and I'm like, well, maybe, I mean, man, maybe there's not a lot, certainly compared to, um, what other demographics, right? So for him in that moment, he was seeing someone that's not white that has elevated in position. So for him, seeing me in that relationship, he visualizes that's a possibility for himself.
Yes.
Whereas absent me, maybe he didn't think that. So
Mhm.
in all these conversations, I try to think about, hey, like, let's not take that away from people, or let's not get in the mix of, why is it wrong for Autumn to be talking to a group of women this way? How does that affect you negatively? Even if you don't need it, or maybe it doesn't resonate with you, like, that's fine, right?
Yeah, and I think, and here's something I would like to say, Eric, because we talked about the haters. I've experienced a ton of bullying throughout my life, but I've experienced a ton, I mean, a lot of internet bullying, harassment, pretty severe. I mean, if you're interested, if anybody's interested, I mean, you can go and there's so many profiles that are mimicking me. I
Mm.
have memes. I'm very famous. I'm very special. They love everything that I do. So, so, they keep an eye on everything that I do. Here's the thing. This is what I want to say. What my forte is, because I'm not like you, right? I am not on the road full time. I am not on the road at all. I am,
Well, I'm definitely not on the road full time. I'll have people remind me of that.
well, yeah, yeah, but
I know that.
I know. And we could even get into the whole like you're less cop than I am. Like
Mm.
I'm more cop because I've been on the road for 15 years. And I just would like to say this. Thank you for your service. Thank you, because we need you on the road. And you are the reason you feel pissed off at us is because you're pissed that you're still on the road, probably. And that's a really hard job. And like, I'm not angry with you for being angry with me. Like I'm just not, because I couldn't do what you do. And that's the truth. But here's the deal. Everybody thinks that I'm like teaching all this cop shit. Honestly, when I go and teach my trainings, I'm not teaching you anything cop shit. Nothing. I am going right to your head. I am doing nothing but mindset training. I am literally teaching police officers how to stay connected to themselves. I'm teaching them how to have a good mindset. I'm teaching people to not be insecure and how we can be secure and confident in ourselves, because that is how we're going to change the culture. The academy and the job teaches you how to be a cop. I'm not going to teach you how to do that. That's not my job. But I can say that if I didn't continually work on my mindset, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And I wouldn't be able to lead, I lead women and men, quite honestly, because my following is 50% men. So like, I'm out there and I'm doing these things, and I just want to say that like it really is it's a mindset component, Eric, and that's really what I'm really big about. And so I just think I wanted to say that, as far as like, sorry, somebody might be at my house right
You're
now.
good.
um
Go.
yeah,
We can take a break so you can go karate chop them if you need to.
no, it's okay. It's actually another trooper, and they're dropping off chicken eggs to our house.
Oh, nice. That's legit. Fantastic. So I was a little distracted. I was about to talk about all the nutritional benefits of eggs that I get excited about. But no, I love that you say that, because mindset is so critical, right? Could you give the listeners a sneak peek? Like, okay, we hear mindset, but where does our minds can go such a variety of places?
Yeah. So, I mean, we could go anywhere with mindset, but again, here's what I saw in my 2 minutes in the job, my 6.5 years in the job, full time, now part time, and coaching men and women all over the world, um, and having a husband who's in this culture, going around and traveling and teaching all of these different um, police departments. Here's what I can tell you is that I believe that what happens is, because of this job, we get very disconnected from ourselves. And we talked a lot about the identity crisis. Well, that was just because I lost who I was. And so if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling like you have no identity outside of law enforcement, that is because you have lost yourself. You've lost your connection to yourself, which is normal. There's nothing wrong with you. This is not rare. This is
Mm-hmm.
very normal. Society wants us disconnected from ourselves, because if we are connected and we are true to who we are going to be less easy to manipulate and control. And so I find that law enforcement, being around the 3 to 5% of the population that nobody wants to be around, tends to become like the 3 to 5% of the population that nobody wants to be around. And
Mm.
that can be triggering. But if you think about it, being cynical all of the time, being very negative, everyone's busting everybody's balls. Nobody believed when I got my back injury, and it's still to this day, like, you'll see my haters talk about a mysterious back injury. There's nothing fucking mysterious about my back injury. And anybody who, like, I'm going to just be honest with you. 3 days ago, I fucking tweaked my back, and I
Mm,
really haven't been able to do shit for the last 3 days. There's nothing mysterious about my back injury, but what happens in this culture is we don't believe people and all of
mhm.
these things. So we really become like the 3 to 5 people that we spend the most of our time with, which happens to be the population that nobody else wants to hang around. And
Yeah,
so my job that I believe is to help people get connected to themselves, because Eric, when we're connected to ourselves, we are going to do good. We will not be insecure. We're going to be secure. And let's be honest, there is nothing worse than an insecure person, an insecure leader, because that insecurity is like poison. And that's
yeah,
what I believe. And so that's what I teach, not to
yeah.
do
You focus on a really key thing, which is that to be a cop successful with safety and tactics and really good at not being killed, really good at not being lied to, is to develop all these senses, right? All these characteristics. They can make you really good at being a street cop and not being killed, but they
Yep.
make you really terrible at relationships. They make you really terrible about introspection and patience and care. And I'm talking about not just relationships at home, right? Being a parent or a partner, but your relationships in the building, right? If you are so cynical and you're so scrutinizing, then yeah, like if someone has a claim, if you're a sergeant or you're a commander or whatever, right, and you don't believe your people when they're struggling, just because there has been maybe a couple incidents somewhere where someone's taken advantage of the system. Okay, but like, how are you going to suss it out? That's what doctors are for. That's what the process is for. That's where I have to lean on the side of, hey, we know that depression, suicide are real things in first responder world. So like, let's just support people and give them the benefit until we. And then that's not our role, right? That's workers' comp. That's LNI. That's their role to suss it out. Um, but yeah, sorry to deviate on that, but
Yeah.
yeah, it just popped up for me. And when you talk about all these judgments, right? And you were 6 years in, man. I mean, the stats. I think the average. I think it was from Perf or something recently. The average cop is tracking like 3 years right now. So
Yeah.
again, I want to lean on this. Hey, like, let's be positive. Let's be collaborative. We're a team in law enforcement or in society to say, hey, if the average person does 3 years as a cop, like, sweet, thanks, right? If you do 4 years in the armed services, like, that's fantastic. Like, thank you for your service.
Mhm.
Why does it need to be 10, 15, 20 years? You don't have to be a career anything to be making a contribution. And I think it just ties in this notion like, well, yeah, what's your copness? Like, what's your level of cop? And there's homicide detectives, there's human trafficking investigators, there's SWAT, there's all these things that are critically important, but like, it's not a measuring contest, folks. And especially when there are necessary voices
Mhm.
like yours, where people are willing to talk about these things because they're not glued to this, the full time,
Mhm.
and it does enable and empower and embolden others to share in that. I think that's all important. It's all we just got to realize we need to stop fighting each other and just be part of this, collective.
And again, that comes from being connected to yourself.
Mm,
We're very disconnected. We're a very disconnected society, but very connected socially, disconnected from ourselves, connected, on our phones all of the time. And it's literally killing us. It's really bad for us. And our morale in law enforcement, I would say, is at an all-time low across the country, probably across the world, but I can't speak for the world, other countries. But again, that's my job, is in my opinion, and that's what I teach is, because that's where it starts, Eric. It has to start with us. It has to start with us being good with us. If you're not good with you, you're gonna not be a happy person.
yeah. So I love everything you're putting down. What are the simple, maybe the low hanging fruit that people listening can be like, okay, that's what I need to start bringing in my life. That's the easy, small baby steps to get me back into awareness, to start strengthening my mindset and making me better, right? For my career, for my family, for everything.
Yeah, I mean, here's the deal. we could take this so many different ways. I'm gonna go very basic with you. When you look in the mirror, how do you feel?
Mm,
And honest. How do you feel? Are you picking yourself apart? Do you hate what's looking back at you? Are you not happy with what's looking back at you? We can, and that's important. Teach a lot of mirror work and self-talk and what we're thinking about. And I talk a lot about being the witness to your thoughts. So actually that's a lot of what my class is about, is that you are literally creating your own reality. So here's what I want you to remember: whether you think you can or you can't, you're 100% right.
mhm.
And that is not good for cops who are completely cynical, right? We become cynical because we see the worst of the world. But I can tell you, from being off the road for a significant amount of time, like I'm still hyper vigilant. I'm still very aware of my surroundings. I always have been. I've seen a lot of things, but I can tell you that every single day, I have chosen to not succumb to the bullshit in my head. And
Mm,
we all have that bullshit. All of us, every single one of us. And I'm telling you, your life is a lot better when you choose to control your thoughts instead of allowing your thoughts to control you. So look in the mirror and what are you thinking? Okay. Start paying attention to your thoughts. It's the most basic thing I could tell anybody to do. Because a lot of times, Eric, what happens is we are thinking the same things over and over and over again. So, a statistic I share in my classes is the human brain. I mean, we could think anywhere from like, oh, I don't know, 70 to 90,000 thoughts a day. And statistically, what has been proven, science has proven, is that we are repeating anywhere from 60 to 70,000 of those thoughts every single day.
mm.
So if you actually think about that, you are literally imprinting yourself on thoughts. Like your thoughts turn into belief systems. And a belief is just a thought that you choose to think over and over and over again. And so that means that if you are not careful, you're developing these belief systems that are doing nothing for you.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. And the belief system is, I'm not good enough. I'll never get this promotion. That guy's a shitbag. That girl, she's a piece of shit. Nobody likes me. This world sucks. This job sucks. Everything's bullshit. This is right? So we buy into these belief systems and you don't have to.
Yeah. That's such a mic drop.
Mm.
It's all these. I love that in the grand scheme of things. Like, how do you change anything? Yeah, it starts with you, right? And you're right. We're so judgmental of ourselves, right? We're so hard on ourselves. We're so mean to ourselves. And if you could capture and you could be in tune enough to look in the mirror, right, and say like, oh, how do you feel? Like, well, I'm looking at my midsection, or I'm looking at my wrinkles, or I'm looking at whatever, the gray hair. Like, if you were would you allow someone to talk like that to your people, like your close circle? Like, absolutely not. You'd sock them in the face, right? And but you're doing it to yourself. And I love that you can, like, looking at some of the little things you're talking about, um as far as mindset, like all these little things, like you can take that and then reflect on, okay, what do you want to do with it, right? Am I going to dig this ditch, or like essentially dig myself into a hole and lower, like a cartoon character going straight down, by furthering its trueness and breathing it into reality, right? Like manifesting it essentially. Or
Yes.
are you going to pivot and say, hey, maybe I'm not where I want to be, but this is exactly the time I reflect on it, and exactly the time that I employ something to change course.
Hmm. Exactly. And I talk
Yeah.
about manifesting a lot.
It's a thing. I mean, it sounds so woo, but I think when you think about, for those that are like, what are they talking about? But no, just thinking about positive, positive mental attitude, right? Things that we learned about as a kid, but really just uh, making making sure you take ownership is a lot of it, right? And just thinking optimistically is how you can get there. I think it involves humility. It also involves surrender. I think it involves giving yourself grace and all these things that we're really not good at, especially, I think, yeah, society. but especially in this emergency responder world.
100%.
And well, I love the breadth of conversations we've had and the road we've gone down. Is there anything you want to leave the listeners in closing? And also, please tell us where everyone can find you and the work you do.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think anybody listening, here's the deal. No matter what it is that you're going through, you're probably facing some sort of adversity in your life. And be it from the job, be it from, your personal life, professional life, whatever it is. And here's what I want you to know. It gets better, and it's not going to stay like this forever, even though it feels like it. When I was injured and I was couch ridden, I was very depressed for 6 months, and I thought, like, I didn't have a plan. I wasn't suicidal, had a plan, but I can tell you this, I didn't really know why the hell I was living anymore. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, even though a lot of people don't want to talk about it. And the steps that I took to get myself out of that hole was I started listening to people who inspired me. So the good thing is you're listening to this podcast. This podcast is a resource for you. People, like myself and other people, Eric, too, is, real life, real people talking about their own shit. And I think that that's important. Number one, because I will tell you, Tony Robbins is what listening to him on YouTube is what got me out of bed.
Mm.
Like he's the one who inspired me. So I just believe what you're putting into your ears and what you're listening, what you're consuming matters so much. So, pay attention to that. And the other thing is this. Please go back if you have to, listen to what I was saying about your thoughts, but please understand that you are in full control. You are in control of your reality. So what you think about, you are going to bring about. And that is actually science. It is proven. Look up quantum physics. It sounds all like spiritual and woo, and we can go there really quickly, but it's all actually backed by science now. So please understand what you're focusing on is going to continue, right? It's going to amplify. So if you are focusing on what is wrong and what is not right, that is going to amplify. I'm asking you to just take a chance and start focusing on what is going right for you so you can allow that to amplify. So that's my advice. You like anything I have to say, you can come and hang out with me on any of the socials. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, under the Autumn Clifford for Instagram, Autumn Clifford for everything else. I run a podcast called She's an Asset, and I have a free Facebook community called She's an Asset, and I offer trainings to police departments for women under She's an Asset. So if that's something that you're interested in, love to come and teach.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much again for your time, Autumn, and I'm sure the listeners got a lot from it. You know where to hit up Autumn, and please send some love, send some feedback to me and Autumn. And until next time, thanks for joining us.